of you might know from our posts that we support Lena from Nikolaev. Lena is going through constant shelling. So we want to give you just a little bit of a glimpse, a little bit of the news that comes directly from the source, from the people that live in Ukraine. What's the realistic situation in Ukraine that now maybe it's not even in the news?
Вообще сейчас Украина стала меньше в новостях, да, а война, она стала более кровожадная, погибает очень много людей.
The war in Ukraine is not in the news as much, but the war not only continues, but there's a lot of bloodshed that continues to happen.
Do you have family members that are in the front lines?
Мой брат старший пошел еще в начале войны на фронт, и он был ранен.
Her older brother went at the beginning and he was hurt.
А младший брат, он тоже на фронте. Сейчас он дома, но скоро будет ехать опять в горячую точку.
Her younger brother was also at the front, and he came back for some treatment, and then he's going back soon to a hot spot.
Can you tell me how many people were in your brother's command?
У моего брата, у младшего, сейчас было 60 человек, и их живых осталось 5.
Her younger brother's brigade was about 60 people, and 5 are left.
What's the most tense situation you've been into since the war?
3-4 месяца после того, как оккупировали территории рядом с нашим городом.
When an area close to her city had been occupied and surrounded by Russians, and
И были письма, которые часто приходили, они просили воду и еду.
people were still writing to her, and they stopped asking for food. They asked for just water because the water had been turned off and cut.
А мы не могли туда передать, потому что русские перекрыли полностью всякую гуманитарную помощь.
They had completely cut off any humanitarian aid going there. The hardest, most intense moment for her was she couldn't do anything. She couldn't get there because they wouldn't let her through. And
И Бог мне дал контакты, просто напомнил мне одного пастыря, который там был. И я с ним связалась, и он меня, свел с волонтерами, и мы стали помогать туда людям в оккупации. То есть этот путь был открыт.
after she had prayed, the next day or two, she had actually remembered a pastor that was able to help out, and he had contacts, and so he could get them in there. And
И вот еще один случай был, это когда мы забирали детей оттуда с мамами, которые не ели 2 недели, и вот они как раз делились зерном.
the other moment was when she was evacuating mothers and children out of that area. These mothers and these children, they had been eating seeds, literal seeds that you would plant in the ground because that's what they had.
И когда мы их вывезли оттуда, привезли в Одессу, чтобы посадить на поезд, который идет в Польшу.
So when they evacuated those families and brought them to the train in Odessa so they could go to Poland,
И мы их накормили пиццей, и дети ели пиццу и плакали.
they bought them pizza, and these kids were just eating this pizza, and they were just crying, eating pizza. And she said she came back home, and there was just this anger inside of her because people could do that to somebody.
You were an experienced driver, correct?
Да. До войны я начала водить машину где-то месяц, меньше даже месяца, вот я села за руль.
She had been driving for about less than a month before the war started.
И когда началась война, через неделю Бог мне сказал, начинай эвакуировать мам с детьми.
And a week after the war started, God just told her to start evacuating mothers and children.
Я делала вид, что я очень опытный водитель.
She tried to look as experienced as she could.
Вывозила раз, 1-2 дня, не спала и за рулем.
They would stand in line at the borders just for a couple of days. So there'd be like a couple of days in a row that she wouldn't sleep.
Tell us a little bit about your driving experience through the minefield.
Мне нужно было поехать к военным. И это только деоккупировали территорию и еще не расчистили от мин дороги.
She was delivering some supplies to some soldiers on the front line who were in the trenches, and they were in an area that had just been deoccupied, and so they hadn't had time to clear it of mines.
И мне солдаты сказали, мы тебе будем кидать частично, как тебе доехать. И говорит, обязательно едь только там, где проехала военная машина.
And so the soldiers couldn't, for safety reasons, they couldn't send her the whole road or the whole map to where they were. So they would send it to her in little pieces. And they said, drive exactly where where the tracks are.
А был сильный дождь, сильное болото, и я ехала, и меня там чуть-чуть переворачивало. Но я вот так вот рулю, и вот так держусь, потому что машина вот так вот. И просто молилась.
And the problem was it had rained, and so the tracks weren't really there. And sometimes there was embankments where she would be holding on with one hand and driving with the other because the Jeep was at an angle. But by God's grace, she got there and back.
Мы везли сетки и медицину. Ну, сетки маскировочные для окопов.
Yeah, they had brought the nets to mask or to hide stuff, and then some medicine to the soldiers.
What is your greatest joy in spite of the war?
У меня большая радость — это друзья. Сильных и которые верных. Вот.
She said her friends, or the friends that God has given her during the war, they are faithful and they're deep.
Why don't you leave Ukraine?
Мне Бог дал выбор.
She felt that God was giving her a choice. She could either stay or go.
Я не могу просто покинуть свою страну вот в таком положении, уехать и жить своей какой-то обычной жизнью.
It was impossible for her to leave Ukraine and then leave her city when things were bad there and when there was trouble there.
How can we show support to you personally?
Во-первых, уже помощь есть от того, что я могу, например, приехать к вам и просто общаться, хотя мне очень сложно находиться в стране, где все хорошо.
She said it's nice to be able to come here and just be able to try to relax, although it's not completely possible because she still knows what's going on there. But being able to come here and just relax a little bit is very helpful.
Я хочу, чтобы я служила постоянно.
Her dream is actually to be able to not have to work, but to serve completely and serve full time.
What's the first thing you'll do when the war will be over?
Когда победа будет, обязательно победа, потому что если у нас не будет победы, нас просто не станет как нации.
As soon as the war is over, victory, because she says that if there isn't victory for Ukraine, then Ukraine will just disappear.
Я бы хотела путешествовать и отдохнуть.
Travel and rest for a couple weeks.
Потому что потом будет еще очень много работы.
Because there's going to be a lot more work after the war.
Это и с военными, и с людьми, которые пережили вот бомбежки, потеряли родных.
Not just with soldiers, but with people who lived through trauma and people who were in occupied territory.
How can we support your ministry?
Из-за того, что сейчас очень упала помощь, и нам все сложнее и сложнее помогать.
It's getting harder and harder to find money for basic things because the support isn't as much as it used to be.
Военные просят это каски, это броники, и людям обычным это лекарства и продукты.
And just every day, soldiers will ask for basic things that they've lost just during conflict. Whether it be helmets or plate carriers, vests, and it's harder and harder to find money for those things because when they lose it, they've got to go back right away, and they can't really wait for the paperwork to get a new one.
Я бы хотела после войны участвовать в реабилитации военных.
She wants to actually be a part of helping soldiers rehabilitate after the war.
Ну, у нас так было время, что нас каждую бомбили каждый день, и мы, например, понимали, что в любой день мы можем умереть, но это не было страшно, мы просто были готовы, мы просто каялись и готовы были каждый день уйти к Богу.
Because their city was Nikolaev was bombed every day, she got used to the idea of being bombed, and that wasn't even scary anymore. They basically repented and were ready to meet God at any moment.
What was the closest bomb or explosion that was next to you?
Был через улицу. Вот.
And across the street. Basically, there's one one building, and then a boulevard, and then they'd hit the school on the other side.
И они всегда стреляют 2 ракеты в одно место.
They would usually shoot 2 rockets close to each other, hoping to hit their target.
И когда первая ракета прилетела, когда выбила окна, когда дом ходил ходуном,
And she heard when the first rocket hit, and the windows were all broken and shattered, and then the building was shaking.
я понимала, что следующая ракета моя.
She knew that the second rocket was going to be close.
Ну, то есть они же не в одну точку, а рядышком бьют, и я помолилась.
And so she just prayed and waited to see if it was going to be her rocket or not.
So, what's the worst question that people have asked you?
Почему Украина до сих пор борется?
Somebody asked her why Ukraine is still fighting.
Из-за того, что Украина еще борется, люди за границей, у них дорогой газ стал, дорогое отопление.
Because they're still fighting, gas and propane and everything else has become so expensive.
Там гибнут мои друзья, там гибнут, то есть жизнь человеческая, ну выше ее дороже ничего нету.
Her friends are dying for their freedom and their existence, and it's Ukraine's fault that people in the world are not as comfortable as they were.
Я сказала все вопросы к Путину.
You can ask Putin that question.
Thank you so much for watching this, and thank you for supporting us to the end. And we are grateful to you guys for persevering to the end with our brothers and sisters in Ukraine.